Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be taking a look at a game between a couple of chess celebrities. And so the white pieces in this game, we got Tryfon Gavriel. Many of you probably know him as Kingscrusher on YouTube. I think he's also got a website, chessworld.net, I believe. And with black, we've got none other than Hikaru Nakamura. So this was a game played on the internet, I believe in 2009. And let's take a look here. So white opens up b3, and Nakamura with black. He plays to stop the bishop here on the dark squares. It's definitely logical. And so just kind of a weird opening. White with knight e2, probably signaling wants to play the double fianchetto type of setup here. And so black just plays something. I mean, Nakamura, when he's playing on the internet, he always plays weird openings because he doesn't want to give away any of his preparation, which definitely makes sense. And so white is just going with a double fianchetto. So pretty standard stuff so far. Nothing too special in the opening. Bishop f5 was nice. This was a good move. I like the idea of threatening to play e4. And, for example, against a move like, c4 especially would be bad. We could say knight to b4, and we're starting to get in some mischief here on this diagonal. But Kingscrusher here, white, he plays d3, and that's definitely the best move. E4 would still be okay by black, but not so effective. And so instead, Nakamura just goes to create a little battery here. Looks like he probably wants to exchange off white's kingside bishop, and that would help set up an attack later. And so now with c4, black could play knight to b4 here, which essentially forces e4, and that was an okay option. But the knight, maybe this e4 move actually kind of helps white. For example, bishop h3 and simply f4. Something like this would seem to benefit white. So knight to b4 looks pretty superficial. And so Nakamura, he just plays bishop h3 directly. And so basically the idea is twofold. First of all, this light square bishop is an awesome piece. It's on a great diagonal. Second of all, it's defending white's king. And so once you exchange off a fianchetto bishop like this, especially on the king side, you're going to be really setting yourself up nicely in the future to take advantage of these potentially weak dark squares, or weak light squares on f3 and g2 and h3 here. And so white plays knight c3. This is very logical. Black just exchanges. And so black plays d5. And this was a pretty nicely timed move because, if he waits and tries to prep it with rook to d8, maybe white stuffs him with knight to d5 here. And all of a sudden, black has got all this, pin-up aggression on the d-file, and he can't let it out. So it was nice to play d5 directly. And this is where Nakamura starts heating things up. So the game is still roughly equal, but black is, with d5, black is really starting to claim a small advantage, because he's starting to open the d-file, and white can't really, he doesn't really want to take this here. For example, if he takes, we take with check for black first of all, and so if we move the king, now the open d-file looks like we're probably going to lose a pawn here, or it's just very unpleasant. And also if we play e4 with white, this does solve the problem of losing the pawn. However, it does create a big weakness, big hole there on d4. And, that's pretty sketchy, honestly. These kind of holes you really want to avoid in your position. Let's say black, either queen d6 or e6. And you might be able to try something like d4, although in this position it doesn't seem possible. And, if d4 doesn't work, for example, by white, black would really probably, he would really just clamp down. Pressure on the d-file, backwards d-pawn. A nice edge for black, but white still has play on the king side, I think. Anyway, that's just kind of what's going on there with the d5 move. Those are that should illustrate some of the main concepts. Black getting this d5 in early, opening the center like this, it's going to make white uncomfortable on the d3 square. And so white played rook c1, and this was an okay move. I think maybe better was just to play a3. And so the idea with a3 is to prepare queen to c2 and not worry about knight to b4. And I think after a move like a3, let's just say rook here, and maybe just queen here. And then we're, either capable of breaking the center if we want to take, or we can bring the rook on d1 and try to play d4. We have a lot of options. And so I think this would have worked out better. My problem with the rook on c1 is it's kind of slow and it doesn't do so much here. But it is a nice developing move, and it seems like white wants to open the, half open the c-file here. So it does make sense. And black goes with it. He plays rook d8, and we're starting to feel that pressure. It's becoming tangible. And so here we see a3. You might be thinking queen c2 is okay. It's no big deal, but it is a big deal because here, if you capture for black, opening this d file, and now knight to b4, we're going to see this soft square on d3 is going to become very, very relevant after a move like knight to d3, followed by something like e4, really cementing the knight, also opening prospects of attacking on the king side. The knight on d3 is just a monster. It's too good. So, white is, this is a little sketchy, and I think a move like a3 instead of rook to c1 would have helped white in this position. Now he plays a3, and that's still okay. Black plays queen e6, and so now this is pretty uncomfortable here on the d file. We can feel that x-ray going right towards our queen. White decided to capture. I think queen c2 was better. I do, because opening the d file just feels weird with your queen there. And it really opened up white in this position to capture to a lot of tactics. But I think queen c2, we get off that file. For example, if d4, it's okay. We can take it. Our bishop is going to be blocked for a second. But let's say if black's not careful, let's say if he takes, actually in this position, it looks like white's going to win a pawn. He's either going to win the d4 pawn or the c7 pawn. And, he's going to have a good game. White's going to have an okay game. So it seems like, yes, in this position after capturing, black could also capture with the knight. But even here, let's just say rook takes is a little sketchy. Rook takes, you might be kind of losing a little bit of material. But let's say even with pawn takes, say in this position, we could probably, again, it looks like you're going to win a pawn. Either with knight b5, this is pretty complicated. At least, you got to be careful. These checks, it's not going to help you out very much. But maybe just knight to e2. Either way, I think black is a little bit better here, but not that much. And that's nice. White at least has some counterplay, I think. Even if c5, maybe we can play b4 right away, or just transfer the rook to the e file. Anyway, just going back to the game, I just think in this position after queen to e6, with this pressure on the d file, and I just think it just makes sense to me to get the queen off, and then at least capture, and you can bring your rook over to help out. Another thing we're going to see with this capture here, after knight takes, is that now black is able to jam out with his f-pawn. And now we're going to start seeing the weakened position, those weak light squares around white's king. That's going to be exploitable here. That's going to become quite relevant. And so that's another downside of immediately capturing. And so now we see white, he can't take the knight because of check. And this check wins the d-pawn. And so instead, now we see knight to e4, accelerating f5. And after knight c5, Nakamura just gives away the bishop and simply follows up with f4. And in this position, white is in a lot of trouble because these light squares around his king are so weak. And namely, black has got really two huge threats here. He's threatening f3 to win a piece, and pawn takes e3, winning a pawn and also quite weakening white's king. And so I think white's only way out of this is really sketchy. He's got to take on f4. So that eliminates the threat of black capturing the e3 pawn. And now I think he's got to play knight to g1. And it's very sketchy when you're moving the knight. You're moving the knight completely backwards. But white does have some consolation. He's got an active rook. He's got a very nice bishop. And as long as he doesn't get mated really quick here, I think he's okay. Black does have moves like queen f5 and queen g6. They're very unpleasant, hitting the d3 pawn. But it's not the end of the world. White is still definitely in the game. But in the game, white captured with the g-pawn, and this is a last resort measure. Something you never want to do unless you absolutely have to, because it just gives lasting weakness to white's king. And so after knight takes, Nakamura just sacks a rook here, really a temporary sacrifice. as after recapturing with check, he captures the d3 pawn. So he just got 2 pawns there, and he's also threatening the bishop and rook, and knight takes f2 check, winning white's queen, essentially forcing queen to c2, and after capturing on c5, and queen takes b3, black is up 2 whole pawns, and he's also got some really nasty threats with queen to f3 check, and just long-lasting threats against white's king. So 2 pawns is quite a lot. White tried to defend. This was a nice defense. He was anticipating black trying to lift his rook somehow and attack on the g-file. And so black played rook d5. Nice move as well. Forcing queen to c3. And now simply, in the game, Nakamura traded queens. However, he could have played queen to b5 here. And this is a really nice double attack, hitting the bishop and the rook. And white would be pretty much, he's just going to lose a piece here. He's already down 2 pawns, he's going to lose another piece. And so in the game, Nakamura captured with his queen and played rook d3. You know, with 2 extra pawns here, Nakamura's pretty solid GM. I think he'll be able to close this out. And so he ended up, it's still instructive, the technique though. He instantly just goes after the bishop, ties down the rook. And the next phase, you know, he instantly trades off the rooks and gets rid of all hope for white of getting any counterplay. And once the rooks are traded, you know, it's going to be a lot easier with those 2 extra pawns. We see a couple more trades, and Nakamura traps the bishop. And now we see kind of a funny ending here with the kings, both sides racing, and black he just traps the bishop, and well, he's going to have 2 extra pawns. That'll be enough to win. So a pretty nice example of how to take apart a double fianchetto position, also single fianchetto. You know, Nakamura traded it off. He combined the activity in the center, the pressure in the center, was able to transform that and that extra space, that initiative, into a kingside attack, which won a decisive amount of material. So this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.